What's up folks, it's Blue here from Blue Bears Games, and for today's video, I have a spicy little budget build using one of the more popular commanders over the last 2 years, Yuriko the Tiger Shadow. Some of you may remember that I featured Yuriko in my second 5 commanders under $5 that will make your friends hate you video. That video was actually the catalyst for me wanting to add this build to my budget decks that I have available for sale on my Facebook page. To start things off, let me tell you exactly what Yuriko does first, and then I'll show you the rest of the deck. Yuriko is 1 black, 1 blue, and 1 generic mana for a 1/3 legendary human ninja with 2 abilities. The first ability is called Commander Ninjutsu, with a cost of 1 black mana, 1 blue mana, and returning an unblocked creature you control to your hand. The second ability states that whenever a ninja you control deals combat damage to a player, reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand, and each opponent will lose life equal to that card's mana value. Commander Ninjutsu means that you pay the cost to put the card onto the battlefield from either your hand or the command zone, tapped and attacking. This ability is one of the few in the game that gets around commander tax, which is what makes her so good. Yuriko is currently the only card in the game with Commander Ninjutsu, and the only difference between it and regular Ninjutsu is that it can be done from the command zone instead of just from your hand. Keep that in mind as I go through the rest of the deck, because the theme of this build is centered around ninjas and the ninjutsu ability with a smattering of unblockable creatures thrown in. Before I get to it and show you the rest of the 99, I want to take a moment to let you know that if you're in the market for an awesome looking deck box, playmat, or sleeves, please visit our sponsor at arcane-fortress.com and take a look at what they have. Their deck boxes are some of the best I've ever used, and you can even get an additional 5% off of your total purchase if you use discount code BLUEBEAR at checkout. If you're interested in the deck box and want to take a closer look at it, check out the link that just popped up at the top right of your screen. That link will take you to a review I did of their Radiant 100 Plus Hidden Island deck box so you can see how it looks and hear all about its features. Now let's get to it, and I'll show you what the rest of this budget commander build looks like. So I'll start with the lands, and what I've chosen for this are the basic budget lands I choose for mana fixing. So we start with Waterfront District. It helps you draw a card later if you don't need it anymore. Dismal Backwater, because it helps gain you life. Salt Marsh. Submerged Boneyard. Dimir Guildgate. Thriving Isle, and then of course its partner in that, Thriving Moor. Encouraging Waste, because if you've seen any of my budget deck builds before, you know that I always say that I put something that does land destruction because you never know what you're going to run into. Evolving Wilds for deck thinning. Metamorphic Expanse for the same thing. And then the rest is just basic islands and swamps. And I went a little heavier on the islands than swamps because this is a little heavier of a blue deck than it is black. The ramp that I chose for this deck is a little different. We don't have a lot of good options in black and blue, so we had to rely on artifacts to do it. So I wanted to thin the deck of lands, or at least of bad draws later, so I went with things like Traveler's Amulet and Renegade Map, so I could get them out of the deck and into your hand. Mindstone, because you can sack it later if you don't need it to draw a card, which is useful. Felwar Stone, because these 2 colors are some of the more popular ones in the game, so you shouldn't have a problem hitting on the blue or the black. Dimir Keyrune is actually techie. It's a 3-cast artifact that taps out of black or blue, but it also can be turned into a 2/2 creature that's unblockable, which is what you want for this style of deck. Dimir Locket, again, for drawing cards later, and of course the Clue Stone, because again, drawing cards later. As far as the creatures go for this build, this is, at its very heart, a Ninja's Tribal deck, so we're going to show you the Ninjas first and then go from there. Most of these, but not all of them, have the ability Ninjutsu, so keep that in mind. The first one we'll start with is Thousand Face Shadow, which is a 1-cast 1/1 that has a Ninjutsu of 4, flying, and then when it enters the battlefield, from your hand, if it's attacking, create a token that's a copy of another target attacking creature, and the token enters the battlefield tapped and attacking as well. The way it enters the battlefield attacking is if it's ninjutsu'd in, so keep that in mind and remember that card for later. Moth Dust Changeling is a 1-cast 1/1 that is a changeling, so it has every creature type, so it is technically a ninja, so keep that in mind. And then you can tap an untapped creature you control to give it flying until end of turn, so it has a small bit of evasion. Moon Circuit Hacker is a 2-cast 2/1 where its ninjutsu is 1 blue, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card, and if you do, you discard a card unless it entered the battlefield this turn via the ninjutsu ability. Nezumi Prowler is a 2-cast 3/1. Its ninjutsu costs 1 black and 1 of any, and when it enters the battlefield, target creature you control gains Death Touch and Lifelink until end of turn. So it gives little buffs here and there, and you're going to want to use that on Yuriko. Dokuchai Silencer is a 2 to cast 2/1. Its ninjutsu is a black and a white, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may discard a creature card, and when you do, destroy target creature or planeswalker that player controls. So good removal. Inkrise Infiltrator is a 2 to cast 1/2 with flying, and it gets a bonus of +2/+2 until end of turn for each 4 you put into it. It doesn't have ninjutsu itself, but it is a ninja that can buff itself. Silver Fur Master is a 2 to cast 2/2 with ninjutsu, and it says ninjutsu abilities you activate cost 1 less, and also it's a lord that gives all other ninjas and rogue creatures you control +1/+1. That's quite important for later. Prosperous Thief is a 3 to cast 3/2. Its ninjutsu is 2, and whenever one or more ninjas or rogue creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. Now it says one or more, so as long as one does it, doesn't matter how many after that, it only counts for the one. Covert Technician is a 3 to cast 2/4 with a ninjutsu of 2, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may put an artifact card with a mana value less than or equal to that damage from your hand onto the battlefield. So the reason why I put sacrificing things to go get lands into the deck was so that you could go get them later with the Covert Technician. Mistwalker is a 3 to cast 1/4. It's a changeling, so it does count as a ninja, has flying, and has an ability that gives it +1/-1 for each 2 you put into it. Just make sure you don't do it 4 times or you kill the creature. Venomous Changeling is a shapeshifter. It's a 3 to cast 1/3 with Death Touch. Throat Seeker is a 3 to cast 3/2 ninja that gives unblocked attacking ninjas you control lifelink, so it helps gain life for you. Satoru Umezawa is a 3 to cast 2/4 legendary human ninja with whenever you activate a ninjutsu ability, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order, and this ability triggers only once each turn. It also says each creature card in your hand has ninjutsu of 1 black, 1 blue, and 2 of any. Moon Snare Specialist is a 4 to cast 2/2 with a ninjutsu of 3, and it says when it enters the battlefield, return up to 1 target creature to its owner's hand. So it's a little bit of tempo. Ninja of the Deep Hours is a 4 to cast 2/2 with a ninjutsu of 2, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card, so that's very good. Moonblade Shinobi is a 4 to cast 3/2 with a ninjutsu of 3, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, create a 1/1 blue illusion creature token with flying. So one of the weaknesses here is that there's not a lot of flying, which is why the shapeshifters are in here, all the changelings that I put in here that have flying. This helps alleviate some of that too. Futurist Operative is a 4 to cast 3/4, no ninjutsu, but it has as long as it is tapped, it's a human citizen with base power and toughness of 1/1 and is unblockable, and then you can pay 3 at any time to untap it. So this is how it works. You can attack with it as a 3/4. When it taps, it turns into a 1/1. People may not block it, so you can immediately turn it into a 3/4 again by paying the 3 to untap it. So it's a little weird how they did it, but that's how that works. Azura Smoke Shaper is a 4 to cast 3/3, ninjutsu of 2, and then when it enters the battlefield, target creature you control gains indestructible until end of turn. Mukatai Ambusher is a 4 to cast 3/2 with lifelink and ninjutsu cost of 2. Ingenious Infiltrator is a 4 to cast 2/3 with a ninjutsu cost of 2, and it's a black and a blue on this one. And it says whenever a ninja at all, any ninja you control deals combat damage to another player, you draw a card. So it's a little bit better than the other one that draws you a card. Ninja of the New Moon is a 5 to cast 6/3 with ninjutsu of 4. That's all it is. It's just a really big ninja so that you can get a lot more damage through with its 6 power. Fallen Shinobi is a 5 to cast 5/4 with a ninjutsu of 4, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top 2 cards of their library, and until end of turn, you may play those cards without paying their mana cost. It's a really good card. That's why it's 5 to cast. Dokuchai Shadow Walker is a 6 to cast 5/5 with ninjutsu of 4, and again, this is the same thing as the 6/3 version that I had in here. It's just so you can get extra damage through. That's the ninjas. The next one's going to be the unblockables, because with ninjutsu, you need unblockables. So we'll start off with Tormented Soul. It's a 1 to cast 1/1 that can't be blocked and can't block. Changeling Outcast. This does count as a ninja. However, because it's solely unblockable, I put it in this section. It's a 1 to cast 1/1 that is every creature type and can't block or be blocked. Metathran Soldier is a 2 to cast 1/1 that can't be blocked. Benthic Infiltrator is a 3 to cast 1/4 with not only can it not be blocked, but Devoid, which means it's not actually a color, and Ingest, which means that when it deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top card of their library. That's not really that important, but it's an extra added bonus. Norok Invisimancer is a 3D cast 2/1. It can't be blocked, and when it enters play, target creature becomes unblockable until end of the turn. Phantom Ninja is a 3D cast 2/2 unblockable. Phantom Warrior is another 3D cast 2/2 unblockable. And Death Cult Rogue is a 3D cast 2/2 that can only be blocked by other rogues. And these symbols here mean it's hybrid mana, so that you can either pay 2 blue and 1 generic, 2 black and 1 generic, or a black and a blue and a generic. That's how that works. The last creature card in the deck is just a utility card. It's called Cridle of Baldur's Gate. It's a 2D cast 1/3. And it says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player loses a life and mills a card. Then you gain 1 life and scry 1. This is in here as sort of an alternate style win con, so you can whittle down opponents' life totals, but it's not that great. It says whenever you attack, you may pay 2, and if you do, target creature can't be blocked this turn. That's why this card is in here. The instants and sorceries of this deck focus on the 2 main things that these colors do. Black does removal, blue does card draw. So let's look at what I put in here. For removal, I have Cast Down, which destroys a non-legendary creature as an instant. Go for the Throat, which destroys a non-artifact creature at instant speed. Murder, which we should all know by now is a 3D cast instant that just destroys a creature. Mage Hunter's Onslaught is a 4D cast sorcery that destroys a creature or a planeswalker, and then it says whenever a creature blocks this turn, its controller loses a life. So either they block and lose 1 life, or they don't block and lose the life that the power of the creature is. So it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. Grim Bounty is a 4D cast sorcery that destroys a creature or a planeswalker and then gives you a treasure token. And then the blue stuff is going to be counter magic, because that's blue's form of removal for sure. Bouncing things isn't really removal, it's just temporary removal. This is permanent removal. So Annul is first. 1 to cast, it counters an artifact or enchantment spell. Negate counters a non-creature spell. Familiar's Ruse counters any spell, but as an additional cost to cast it, you must return a creature that you control to your hand. And that's actually a really good thing in this deck, because returning creatures back to your hand is very beneficial. And the last counter magic spell is Disdainful Stroke. It's 2 to cast, and it counters a spell that's converted mana value is 4 or greater. Now for blue's card draw. So I went with things that manipulate the top couple cards of your library and then put 1 into your hand. Brainstorm, of course, draws you 3, and then you take 2 from your hand and put it back on top. It was as close as I could get to being the same thing. So Opt scries 1, so you can look at the top card of your library and either put it on the bottom of your library or put it back on top and then draw it. And then you have things like Anticipate. So you look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. And then Impulse is the same thing, but you look at 4 cards. Shimmer of Possibility does it for 2, but you can look at the top 4 cards again. Only this puts them on the bottom of your library in a random order. Chart of Course, it's 2 to cast sorcery, you draw 2 cards. Then you discard a card unless you attacked with a creature this turn, which shouldn't matter because in this deck, the whole theory of it is to keep attacking. And Discover the Impossible is a 3D cast instant that you look at the top 5 cards of your library, you exile 1 of them face down, and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. You may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost if it's an instant spell with a mana value of 2 or less. If you don't cast it, you put it into your hand instead. The last instant / sorcery that I have in here is Mass Appeal. It's a 3D cast sorcery that says draw a card for each human you control. Almost every, and it's not going to be every, but it's a lot of them. Almost every creature in this deck is a human, so you should be able to draw a lot of cards off this. The enchantments, or should I say the enchantment section, 1 enchantment of this deck is Smoke Shroud. It's a 2 to cast aura that enchants a creature, and the enchanted creature gets +1/+1 in flying, so it helps alleviate that lack of flying. However, it says whenever a ninja enters the battlefield under your control, you may return Smoke Shroud from your graveyard to the battlefield attached to that creature. That's really good for Yuriko, so when you ninjutsu Yuriko in, if this is in your graveyard, it attaches to Yuriko, buffing its power because you're going to try your best to get commander damage done on at least 1 or 2 of your opponents. The non-ramp artifacts of this deck are all equipment and all do something very beneficial for this deck. So we start with Explorer Scope. It's a 1 to cast equipment. It equips for 1, and it says whenever the equipped creature attacks, look at the top card of your library, and if it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped. Since this deck is focused on combat, you're going to be attacking a lot, so at least you might as well get a benefit of a little bit of ramp with it. Cranial Plating is a 2 to cast equipment that it equips for 1. gives the equipped creature +1/+0 for each artifact you control, which isn't that big in this deck because it's not an artifact-based deck. However, there are a couple of things in this deck that are artifacts themselves, and there's one or two things that also create artifact tokens for you, so that will help. The reason why this is in here is because it is one of the very few equipments in the game that can attach to a creature at instant speed. That line here says, for 2 black, you can attach it to target creature you control. There is no caveat to it. It is an instant speed activation. So when you ninjutsu something in, you can attach this to it to get the damage higher. That's why that's in here. Mirror Shield, by now you should recognize, is my way to protect one of your creatures on the board. It gives it +0/+2 and hexproof. And then this weird, whenever a creature with Death Touch blocks or becomes blocked by this creature, destroy that creature. It's just a bonus of some sort. Goggles of Night is a 2-cast equipment that equips for 2, and then whenever the equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you scry 1 and then draw a card. So more manipulation of the top of your library to be able to draw better cards. And the last equipment is Quiet as Spike, which is 3-cast, equips for 3. The equipped creature gets Death Touch, and then whenever the equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses half their life rounded up. So remember, this is a deck of unblockables. You may not be able to win with commander damage all the time. You may have your whole strategy disrupted. Quiet as Spike is an alternate way to get a lot of life off of your opponents. So this is not necessarily an alternate win con, but it's a way to lead to a different way to win. So I included one Planeswalker in this deck. It was Kaido, Dancing Shadow. It is a 4-cast Planeswalker that enters the play with 3 loyalty counters and has 4 abilities, one of them static and 3 of them actual loyalty abilities. The static ability says that whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you may return one of them to its owner's hand. If you do, you may activate loyalty abilities of Kaido twice rather than once this turn. So that means that if you have a creature unblocked or what have you, or as trample if it so happens, you can return it to your hand and activate Kaido twice. As far as his loyalty abilities go, the first one says for adding 1 loyalty counter, you can have up to 1 target creature not be able to attack or block until your next turn. There's a 0 loyalty ability here that you can draw a card, and then there's a -2 ability, or take 2 loyalty counters off, to create a 2/2 colorless, what does that say, drone artifact creature token with Death Touch, and when this creature leaves the battlefield, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So you can see the abilities here match what I wanted for this deck. It even creates artifact creature tokens, which helps some of the other cards out. The other thing it does is that it also can help drain your opponents of life and give you life back. So everything here is helpful. The draw card is helpful. Being able to make something not be able to block or attack is helpful. Just overall, this was a good one. And it's actually a budget price, so for this deck, it was perfect. The last thing I want to go over for this deck is a combo. You saw most of the pieces, but you didn't see the actual piece that makes it all come together. That card is Peregrine Drake. It is a 5-cast, 2/3 flyer that says when it enters the battlefield, untap up to 5 lands. So rather than do this live, I'm actually going to record how this combo works and which cards it includes right now. On top of the Peregrine Drake, you will also need Thousand Face Shadow and Silver Fur Master, aka Master Splinter, to pull this off. The way to start this is Thousand Face Shadow must be in your hand, and the Peregrine Drake and Silver Fur Master must be on the battlefield without summoning sickness. You also need to control up to 5 lands that can tap to produce at least 1 black mana, 3 blue mana, and 1 generic mana. You need to attack with the Silver Fur Master and Peregrine Drake and not have them blocked. How you accomplish this will vary wildly, but it needs to happen for this to work. When they aren't declared as blocked, immediately tap 5 lands that can add the 1 black, 3 blue, and 1 generic mana to your mana pool. Activate Thousand Face Shadow's Ninjutsu ability using 2 of the blue and 1 of the generic mana that you had floating, and return Silver Fur Master from the battlefield to your hand. This will put Thousand Face Shadow onto the battlefield from your hand, tapped and attacking. When the Thousand Face Shadow enters play, its Enter the Battlefield ability will trigger, and you will target the Peregrine Drake with it, creating a token copy of it that is tapped and attacking. When the Peregrine Drake token enters play, its Enters the Battlefield ability will trigger, untapping up to 5 lands. You will then activate Silver Fur Master's Ninjutsu ability by paying the 1 black and 1 blue mana that you still have floating, and return Thousand Face Shadow from the battlefield to your hand. This will now put the Silver Fur Master onto the battlefield from your hand, tapped and attacking. Tap those same lands that you just untapped with the Drake token to again add 1 black, 3 blue, and 1 generic mana to your mana pool. Simply rinse and repeat this ninjutsu activation loop however many times you want, and it will result in infinite Peregrine Drake tokens that are tapped and attacking, infinite enter the battlefield triggers, and infinite leaves the battlefield triggers. Once you're done doing all of the ninjutsu shenanigans, advance to the next part of combat, which is the deal damage step, and you'll also deal infinite combat damage to the defending opponent with all of the Drake tokens. One quick side note though, this combo also nets infinite mana, but you'll end up using that mana as you do the steps, so there's no actual gain unless one of your lands happens to tap for more than just 1 mana on its own. The reason that this combo works is because the ninjutsu ability has no limit to how many times you can activate it before advancing to the deal damage part of combat. Either this was intended by WotC or just an oversight, but either way, it works. One other quick note, this is not the only combination of cards you can do this with. There are at least 2 more in this build without even making any changes. Do you know which cards they are? If so, let everyone know in the comments. And there you have it folks, my newest budget commander deck build, helmed by Yuriko the Tiger Shadow. This deck is available for purchase on the Blue Bears Games Facebook page while supplies last for $40. I have a feeling that this one won't last long, and once it's gone, it may take me a little bit to put another version of this deck together, so if you want it, you better act quickly. With multiple ways to win, and the fact that its color identity is one of the more popular color pairings in the game, I can see why it's one of the most popular commanders over the last couple of years. While this is just a simple budget build, it's still quite powerful for such a low price tag. The options you have to upgrade this deck are pretty vast, so this is a perfect shell to start with and upgrade over time. Next week's video will be another budget commander build, only this time it will cover a customer requested deck that I've done before, but badly needed an update. The original video is just over 3 years old, and the deck has changed significantly enough that it warranted an updated video, so please be sure to join me next Friday for that. That's all the time I've got for now. I want to thank you for watching, and if you could, please do me the favor of giving the video a like, subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so yet, sharing this out to anyone you think would enjoy it, and visiting our sponsor at arcane-fortress.com and using discount code BLUEBEAR for an additional 5% off your order if you decide to purchase anything from them. Now, unless you decide to go and watch some of my many other videos, I will see you all next week.